Anyway, I wanted to open it with our prayer. I'll do it in English this time. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. You have sanctified us through your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves in things of Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Well, for those of you who weren't here last week, we had just read up to Exodus 4, 18. We had finished with Exodus 4, 18.
Marty, excuse me, Marty, could I?
Yes.
Do you mind if I do my Shakespeare first?
I will. I'll get there in a second.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, David. I haven't forgotten. And so what we will be doing is beginning with verse Exodus 4, verse 18, because it's all part of the same sequence of events. Okay, so David, you've got the floor.
Well, thank you, Marty, and I'd like to add my welcome to all of you on this very crowded and busy and enthusiastic BSTC Torah study. My quotation today comes from our friend William Shakespeare, who has had so many things to say on everything. And in this quotation, I think, which you all know very well, I believe he really touches on a very important essence of what it is like to be Jewish. It's Portia's speech from the Merchant of Venice. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throne's monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptred sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself, and earthly power thus then show like as gods when mercy seasons justice. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. What I would like to do, if you may, I was going to do some things I decided not to last week to allow some other discussion because I felt that was more important. So, but if we have time, eventually we'll get back to that. In the meantime, if somebody would like to begin our reading, Exodus 4, verse 18.
Be happy to.
Okay.
Well, somebody else.
Why don't you do it, Ricky? That'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay. 18. Moses went back to his father-in-law Jethro and said to him, "Let me go back to my kinsmen in Egypt and see how they are faring." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace."
Okay. Any further discussion about that? Okay, well then we will remember that. And now verse 19, Ricky, if you would like to please read 19 and 20.
Right. The Lord said to Moses and Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who sought to kill you are dead." So Moses took his wife and sons, mounted them on an ass, and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God with him.
Okay. Any comments?
Well, where's his staff?
Oh, not specifically. Marty?
Please, Steve.
Yeah, not specifically to these particular sentences that are being said, but like in general, and I don't know if you've touched on this because I haven't been a regular attendee, but there are a lot of interesting theories about who was Moses exactly. Was he perhaps an Egyptian? And of course, Freud, who's quite well known, also wrote a little bit about it and had his own opinion. Moses and Monotheism was the name of his book.
Yes.
And, it's a little radical, but basically argues that Moses was an Egyptian and killed by the Israelites, if I remember the the gist of it correctly. And the story that we read is myth. And again, I know some people are concerned about the word myth. Myth does not denigrate, the story. It establishes the story as a perhaps not entirely historical rendition, but a narrative that establishes a people. So
Okay.
things had to be adjusted and changed a little bit. There was a pharaoh. There are also a lot of theories about the pharaoh, because there was a pharaoh around this time who actually tried to unsuccessfully institute monotheistic beliefs. So is this the pharaoh who was kind of Moses's foster father or foster grandfather, or is there some connection with Moses to all this unsuccessful movement to institute a monotheistic faith? And it wasn't anything like the Jewish faith. It wasn't identical to that. It was a single God that was the sun god, I believe.
Akhenaten is his name. Stephen
Yes.
Akhenaten.
Okay, now this takes us away from the text
Yeah.
that we're going to read. But if
Mhm.
people would like to discuss this, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Yes, Don.
Yeah, coming back to the text, I found it slightly confusing that Moses starts off in Egypt, where God gives him, his instructions as to what he's to do with Pharaoh. And then Moses takes it upon himself to return to Midian to ask his Jethro for permission to turn around and go back to Egypt. But even though he started off in Egypt, so and then and then it doesn't state that Moses told Jethro what his mission was, and so it's kind of a confusing. It's only one verse where he asked Jethro's permission, and then God immediately
Yeah.
to Moses.
I have a response to that from the Midrash, actually, that I have in a response to your concern, your question.
Question. Right?
Well, why after he received a command from God, is he going back to Midian to talk to Jethro about it?
Yeah, I'm not telling Jethro anything about the burning bush. He just says, "I'm coming from Egypt. Can I go back to Egypt?"
Right. And in the Midrash, according to this, I have the Stone Edition, Tanakh, which quotes the Midrash as saying that when someone opens his home to you, as Jethro did to Moses, you owe him your life. So he felt that he couldn't go to Egypt without Jethro's permission.
And that's exactly what we discussed last week.
Oh, okay.
But no, that's good.
There.
I'm glad you're
Okay.
repeating that. Yes, Michael.
I have here the definition of the word myth, And I would, since Steve brought that up, I wonder if you would be interested in hearing that.
Sure.
A traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people, or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involving supernatural beings or events.
Mhm.
Yeah, we
Okay.
spoke about this issue for a long time,
Yes.
and many people had a lot of trouble with me calling it mythology when it's the history of the people.
You know, we have similar things in when we talk about Washington throwing a silver dollar across the Potomac,
Chopping down a cherry tree.
chopping down a cherry tree, and that there's no hard evidence for these events. But so we put those into the category, since nobody was there to observe it or hear it. It falls into the category of myth. Maybe it did happen, but that's left up to the individual, how they want to look at things. And it's not going to detract from the major story, the philosophical intent of the story. Okay. Rabbi Murray, Rabbi Norman, do you want to add anything?
Well, I just would like to refer to the word that here it comes, I'll sit with Yitro, or I'll come back, which it's a root that's very similar. One is yashov, to sit with, to stay, and the other is shuv, which is to go back. So it plays there a few times, saying, I'll do this or I'll do that. So it's not it's not very clear if it stays with Yitro or it goes back. But the fact that it goes back is that it was there. Otherwise, you don't go back. And he calls them brothers. So I think that the issue where he was in Midian or in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, is, yeah, I'm reading the Gale recommendation of Elliot Friedman about Exodus, and Steve, I recommend it very highly that you go into
I'm sorry,
that.
could you
That's the
repeat?
truth.
Could you, I
The
didn't.
book Exodus by
Ex-
Friedman is fascinating. Exodus.
Yes.
Oh, Exodus by Friedman. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know Gail
Yeah, so he
has
does
mentioned that too.
what you were
and Larry.
trying to say.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I think that we have to read it as is. So, Rabbi Norman.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
It seems fairly straightforward to me. He received his message from God. He went back to get his wife and sons, and he wants to take them with it. And he's being courteous enough to let Jethro know. Is he really asking permission? He's going to do it anyway because God told him to do it. But he's giving him the courtesy because of the relationship that they've already established, of saying, "Listen, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to Egypt. I'm going to take Zipporah and the boys with us, and this is my calling."
That I think that it's just not stated specifically.
Right, but interesting.
But
most people may not.
That's
Most
probably what happened.
most people may not be aware that Jethro's permission statement, Jethro's blessing to Moses on his journey, lech l'shalom, go in peace. Even to the present day, people will say that in Hebrew. Okay, that
Another very
I wish you well
important
on your
point.
journey, lech l'shalom, go in peace.
One thing that I would like to say
Yes.
is, while we're on the discussion, Marty and the others, is that I am so impressed with the character of Jethro. He is portrayed in Exodus, and obviously he's portrayed in the Ten Commandments as just this wonderful, wonderful man who welcomes Moses into his home. And he just seems to me to be ahead of his time and far kinder and more decent than so many of the others of that time. Really impressed with Jethro.
It's an excellent point, yes. But it's somewhere, whether whatever word we use for whether Jether or Jethro, it appears that he's very knowledgeable about the Hebrew God, and he is also going to be used as a messenger. Okay, we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to point out that Wendy is here today, and we can actually see her. She's
Hey,
waving
Wendy.
right now. I want to thank her for cleaning up my coffee spill just now.
Uh-oh.
And we're welcoming Wendy, and we love her very much.
We all do. Yes, Steve.
Just another thing that's kind of obvious, but I guess, we often just quickly read through it without, making careful note of it is, that at various periods, intermarriage was not a problem and not frowned upon. And it only became a problem in certain specific defined situations. And, I don't know if the rabbis can comment on that a little bit, but, the whole issue of intermarriage.
Yes, there is.
We
There is,
as-
Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, there is. There is. Do you remember how Abraham asked to choose a wife? He said, no, I don't want a Canaanite. Intermarriage?
yeah, interesting. But then other times it appears not to be so much of a problem, obviously not for Moses.
Okay, let's Rabbi Norman.
Well, there is one strain in the Midrash that says that the intermarriage was not Moses and Zipporah. The intermarriage was Jethro and his wife, because Zipporah is a Hebrew name. It's not a it's not a Canaanite name like Yeter or okay.
Mhm.
So there's one strain in the Midrash that Zipporah's mother was Jewish, so it gets Moses off the hook. Okay.
Okay. Well, this
Jewish.
actually dovetails into a discussion we will have later this morning also. So keep all of this in mind. As far as if verse 19, I'm just going to read it again. The Lord said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, ... Is God speaking in Midian, or is it simply that Moses is in Midian?
No,
I think Moses is Midian.
God's adding more. If Moses may have been a little hesitant, but he was going to. So here's one extra clarification. God says, "Hey Mo, you don't have to worry too much. Those fellas who were after you, seeking, whatever, they're no longer around. So it's okay." So God is speaking to Moses while Moses was in Midian.
Right. That's how I would interpret that, as opposed to speaking in Midian. Okay. And then what about in verse 20? Moses took his wife and sons, mounted them on an ass, and went back, ... Any comments about that? What is the ass theme in Torah?
Earlier or later, Howard?
Any
Right.
idea?
Yeah,
Well,
What?
I think
okay,
that Rabbi
Abraham-
Roman
yeah.
said it
Okay, Mary,
nicely,
Rabbi Mary.
later or earlier.
Well, the theme comes up. If you know, we've read through Torah
Helen.
before. Yes, go ahead.
Elena wants to talk. Helen,
Helene.
Oh, Lynn? What?
No, Helene.
Oh, Helene. Helene. I'm sorry. I was looking for, there are so many places that I'm sorry, Helene, please.
That's funny. No apology. I keep hearing the same theme over and over. Go in peace. Take your sons with. Take your family with. It's the theme of who we are. Go
Yes.
in peace with your family, generally, and go in peace without your family. Come on. Which is
Right.
the strongest? Which one makes such a difference? And here we are, all of us, not with all our families and COVID, and it's Hanukkah, and we are hurting those of us who cannot enjoy totally, as far as I'm concerned, that you can, but without your family, at least on FaceTime or something, how can you totally be in peace? It's just a thought.
No, it's good. You remember we discussed this also when we discussed that we're going to be seeing the play between two different words, going and coming, in this portion of Exodus, it becomes it's going to be mentioned quite frequently, and here it is again. Yes. Okay.
Marty,
Rabbi
can I just add one little thing to Helene's
Yes.
lovely comment? Okay, that Lech Shalom, she said, go in peace or continue on your journey in peace. Shalom is also shalem, which is also complete, being fulfilled.
Right.
Okay, or having, being a complete self, if you will, in a psychological sense. So that's, Jacob emerged from his battles shalem, complete and healed in that sense. So
yeah.
I think Helene was leading us in the right direction.
Excellent. Larry.
Okay, Everett Fox commentary. Mounted them upon a donkey, a stereotyped biblical way of describing setting out on a journey. Now, also the fact he's taking wife and son with him meant he felt safe. If he thought there was still a price on his head for the crime he committed, and he would be vulnerable, he would not take family.
Right. Michael, and then Gail.
Yeah, I have a question. The last sentence of 19, Moses took the rod of God with him. I suppose he's talking about the Moses staff. And my question is, when did Moses get possession of the staff? When did that occur?
When he was in the bush, when he was in the bush, or when
Right.
And
It
he
was
was a shepherd. Every shepherd has a staff.
This is the same staff that God tells Moses to throw down.
Okay.
It becomes a snake.
Gotta do business,
Moses has to
people,
pick the snake up by the tail, and it becomes the rod or staff. Right.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. You're
Got
welcome. Gail?
I just thought the sentence structure was rather interesting. He took his family, his sons, put him, and went back to Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. It's kind of like, we don't want to forget that part. We have to
Right.
put it in there. Yeah.
Well, this staff is going to be doing the staff.
right.
theme is going to not only be in this book, it's going to be throughout the rest of Torah.
But it's kind of interesting that how they interjected that.
Gail
particular-
is, Gail and Mike, he's taking a mule or a donkey,
Yeah.
and that's where the stick comes from. The stick. He doesn't have a carrot, but he has a stick.
Very good.
And he's not going to beat. It says nothing about beating the ass for going too slow.
No, that's one of the later stories in the
That's a
Torah.
latest
Right.
story. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so it becomes,
And before, Rabbi Norman was pointing out the donkey appears twice, one before and one after. Which one did you want, Marty?
it's the concept of the mule or ass. They're different, but I think that it's important because he could have rode on a horse
No, he couldn't.
No,
They
he
didn't have
or a
horses.
camel.
Camel, maybe, sure.
Okay, he could have
Right.
done, but what is this when we think of a donkey, a mule, an ass in the hierarchy of equines? Do we think of those animals as lower than others?
No,
Most
No,
people would say
it's
horse
an
is more important.
SUV. It's a truck.
Well, they couldn't have had mules because a mule is a cross
Right.
between a horse and an ass. So that's
Oh.
how.
Please, Pastor Bruce.
If you're getting to the humble aspect
Yes.
of Moses, that's what I was thinking of.
Yes. Yeah, all of the to show, it's also a sign of humility. If you come,
Well, I think that, well, as I say it again, well, Anita, go ahead.
Thank you, Rabbi. I was just wondering because what's really jumping off the page at me is that he took the rod of God, not the staff of God. And we talked a little bit, didn't we, last week about the difference between the staff and the rod.
yes,
And so at this point, God has provided him this spiritual tool, it's a tool for him to go, and he knows what wonders are in store. Or he may be just developing an idea about that. But I think that's an important piece of what we're reading is that it's the rod of God. It's not the staff to help control his herds or guide his people in a way that it has a double meaning there, because he is going to guide the people with it, but it's a tool that he's going to need to use and embrace, so that's all. I just wanted to bring that up, but thank you.
Very good point, Grace.
Reference to that, Marty?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, just going to the Hebrew word that's used, because sometimes we get a little confused if we get
Right.
to
The English is confusing, misleading.
the word that's used is mateh,
Mm-hmm.
which actually literally means like a branch. It's referred when they refer to tribes, for example, it's matot. It's sort of like the branches of a tree. So that's literally, referring. It's not a sort of a reference to sort of a fashioned article of hiking equipment, but it's a branch.
A stick.
It's actually it's a branch, and you can tell that it's a branch. It's a branch of a tree, is what it is. So I'm not sure we can really, do a lot of pill pull. I guess I'm not sure how to say that in English, but
right. No, I agree with Steve. It seems to be almost a commentary by the translators that at some point they're saying rod and some point they're saying staff. Now, Marty, if you folks, again, I apologize, I haven't been with you for a couple of weeks also, but if you had a major discussion about the difference between rod and staff, there, I was just double checking that it's always the same Hebrew word.
Right.
So the translator is adding an interpretation for one reason or another.
Okay.
In the dictionary is the stick and what Steve is alluding to. But my question, and I don't remember, when it goes to Egypt, the Egyptian magicians do the same business of taking a stick and throwing it, and it turns into a snake. I don't remember the word used there.
I'll look it up very quickly.
We discussed it a little bit last week, and I have some notes that I wrote down. So Moses is giving a purpose and tested by God. So the rod could represent a tool by which to ward off a predator and for defense, and the staff is for perhaps to be of guidance. That was the only, even though in Hebrew the word is the same, it may depend on how it's used in context in the literature.
Yeah, one's a symbol of authority.
Well,
right.
In the Egypt, they use the word mate too. Mate of Aaron, mate of Moshe, and mate of the magicians. That's on Exodus.
Yeah, it is the same Hebrew word.
We're going to be getting there very
7.
shortly.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, in Psalm 23, in English, we say, thy rod and thy staff, they comforted me. So both words are used. I don't remember how it's said in Hebrew. Maybe.
And that was
so
right.
what? Shevet and Mateh.
And a Mishan. Yeah, neither one really are refer to what we're talking about here. Right. Yeah.
We went into that in a discussion too. The other thing that and what Grace mentioned was the more all of the discussions that Steve brought in and everything, they are important to understand the role, the tool used as a shepherd. You would have to find a straight branch, something, it's at that time they didn't have lathes, okay, and so they would have to whittle that down. They'd have to whittle a branch down into a straight rod type of, and so you would have to select the correct branch, and that's sort of, I think most people understand that part. Yes, Don.
Well, to me also, from this point, Moses is invested with the metaphysical powers from God. Everything he has, everything he touches, everything he does extends out into, use the word holy. So whether it's his staff or his rod, the axe, everything is divinely inspired, because he's on a long mission, 40-year mission here.
Marty?
Yes.
Marty, I want to clear in my mind, because it's bothering me, that I can think, and Rabbi Norman can add or change or respond on two important donkeys. One is the one that Abraham puts his son on top of it to take him to be slaughtered or sacrificed, sorry.
Yes.
And the second one is one of the funniest stories in the Torah, in my mind, is the donkey that speaks.
Yes.
And it's with Bilam. And find that story. It's very, very cute. So, and that's a really interesting conversation between a donkey and the human being.
It seems that the character of a donkey is, or an ass, is important because it usually heralds something very important.
We
in
actually
Torah.
covered
And
that
I would have to
recently.
I certainly would
Mhm.
defer to Pastor Bruce, but isn't riding on a donkey, isn't that an important image in New Testament
Yes.
literature as well?
Oh,
Yes.
yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Pastor Bruce.
Obviously, in the season that we're in with Mary and Joseph in Bethlehem, and
Yes.
also with Yeshua in riding into Jerusalem on a Palm Sunday, the donkey is very important. Yes. Thank you,
Yes.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the family moves from Nazareth to Bethlehem, and they have a donkey with them. It's
Mhm.
interesting. This is a side story. I work in the UNICEF store, and now it's very high season. And came a woman and said, "I'm looking for a donkey. I want a donkey for my grandchild." And I'm going all over the place, cannot find any donkey except in the, what do you call it?
Nativity scene?
The scene, yeah. That in every scene there is a donkey, but you cannot separate the scene from the donkeys. But my donkey yesterday.
Okay. Any other discussion about?
Yes, we actually did discuss in one of Rabbi Roman's sessions, the talking donkey. And that was also a very interesting discussion, not unlike what we're doing right now.
Thank you, David. That's just sort of adds to what we're talking about, the important role of this animal. Yes, Don.
Are we reading too much into this animal? Because Moses has to get from Midian back down to Egypt, and he's got a wife and 2 little kids. And, the trains were unreliable at the time. And, there wasn't any other way to travel.
Yuba.
If the donkey isn't mentioned, then people are going to be asking, well, how did he get his family all that way back down to Egypt? I think it's a very practical decision in this case. I mean, I understand the donkey has other roles throughout the Bible. In this case, it seems to me a purely mass transit type of thing.
Well, you can assume that also with have the same discussion with Joseph and his brothers and Jacob going back and forth, okay, before they all settle in Egypt. Okay, this is the role. You need some sort of pack animal. Yes.
I have a quickie question. How many sons does Moses have at this time? 2, 3.
2 sons.
2, I think.
2 sons. So he's
We're
got
we're not there yet.
No. Back up in 20. His wife and sons. So the wife and 2 sons mounted them on an ass. An ass is not a very big animal, and he's already got 3 people on top of it. So that just lighter note, just that struck up with me.
She's on top, and 1 kid on each of the side packs. Side saddle.
You're like a motorcycle, yes.
Right.
A mom is used to carrying kids on her hips, so if she's got 1 on each hip, and she's on the ass. I mean, the picture is just. I just thought was funny.
Maybe she was very slight of figure.
It's also, I mean, frankly, you could translate the Hebrew as opposed to specifically, and Rabbi Miri would, mention the quote that Abraham, saddled, it's a different word, saddled Isaac on the donkey. Here and Moses let them ride. It's they're riding on the donkey, as opposed to he specific in the Hebrew, as opposed to he specifically placed them on. So maybe they took turns.
Were they wearing their helmets?
Any further discussion?
Economy.
Okay. And if somebody would like to read verses 21 through 23.
Do you want me to continue?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
Whoever.
And the Lord said to Moses, when you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the marvels that I have put within your power. I, however, will stiffen my heart so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son, and I have said to you, let my son go, that he may worship me, yet you refuse to let him go. Now I will slay your firstborn son.
Okay. Let's take it verse by verse. And in verse 21, any comments or questions? Yes,
Well,
Don, I knew, I had a hunch. Okay. Which one? Okay.
Could someone more
Stephanie.
learned than I explain why God appears to want to hurt Pharaoh? He hardened his heart, and then that will justify what he does later. I don't get that really. Somebody,
Okay.
somebody could help.
I have a very lengthy, is it right to say exegesis on this, but let's hear from everyone else first. Pastor Bruce.
I think, Don, that there's a couple different ways to deal with this issue from my perspective. One, God did believe that Pharaoh deserved to be punished in some way, shape, or form, and that's why it was happening. So he believed that somehow there was a punishment necessary, or God, the word here, and the rabbis can help me with this more than I probably know myself. There's several different words for the word, or there's meanings of this stiffen or hardening of heart. And one is that he was strengthening his heart. If I'm not mistaken, in the wording, it's not just English stiffen or harden, it's strengthen. So if you believe that God is strengthening the heart of Pharaoh, it's what he needed to give him the free will to make all these decisions all the way up through the one that killed his firstborn son. And so I look at this as either God believed Pharaoh needed to be punished, or that God strengthened his heart, which is what he needed to be able to make all those decisions all the way through. And then you can go to the Godfather. He makes an offer that he can't refuse, but he refuses anyway. How is that?
Okay. Suzanne, yes.
Pastor Bruce, there are two words, you're right, that are used for the heart of Pharaoh. And there is a lot of discussion when we get to each one of them. For every plague, he has one. And it's, as you said, there is heavy, kaved, and there is strength, chazak. So I think it will be very nice to look at each one of them in connection to the plague that he did not respond to.
The phrase appears. The phrase appears, I think, 20 times.
Yes.
Yes.
Over the next couple chapters, right?
Yes.
I have a question. Now, in verse In verse 22, he said, and he said, and you're going to say to Pharaoh, so said Adonai. And he says, my first son, I never remember the word in English pronounce, by pro something, is Israel, which is Yaakov.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we always say the father of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And here, the word Israel, it's either strange or it's a referral to the people of Israel. I don't know.
Okay. This is all mentioned. There's a lot written about this. Suzanne, you have politely had your hand up for a while. And
I know, and you called on me too. But anyways, I remember the first year coming to Torah when we first got into Exodus. And I remember you commenting that harden could also mean honor. And even though traditionally, it seems like the translators have used harden, I really like the idea of honor.
That's kaved, it's heavy, heavy,
yes.
heavy. The word heavy.
Because God does not need to stack a deck, in my opinion. And it bothered me, that because I felt like where this Pharaoh was concerned, that God was stacking the deck against him. And that never seemed very godlike to me. But if using the interpretation of honoring what was in his heart, or to me, it makes the whole story make sense.
Okay.
And I shared that with a couple other of my Christian friends, and they really like that interpretation as well.
To sort of underscore what you've just said, does anyone have the Plout edition in front of them? The Plout commentary? I thought somebody has that. I was going to ask them to read a particular.
She's missing from her screen right now, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, let me read it to you then. On page 417 in Plout, and this is in the this is on this exegesis about this very subject. He discusses multiple interpretations throughout the ages for this word, but I wanted to bring something here. This starts. The focus of the story is God's redemptive power, and the image presented tells of his assurance that whatever obstacles Moses and Israel may find in their way, especially a cruel Pharaoh who will not relent, God has already taken them into account and will in fact make them occasions for showing his glory before men. This is subtly but clearly underscored by one of the Torah's favorite means for such a purpose: the use of a key word that conveys a double meaning. For one of the words meaning to stiffen is kaber, which we have commented on. But this word also means to honor. In the final act of salvation at the Reed Sea, God will stiffen Pharaoh's and Egypt's heart and thereby assert his authority and gain him with a capital H, God, okay, honor and glory. Okay, so the same word, according to Plout, Rabbi Plout, it can be used, a word that has a double meaning. Yes, Larry.
Okay, I have Hertz in front of me. Israel is my son. This expression is here applied for the first time to Israel as a nation.
Nation, that is correct.
Firstborn.
That's what I thought.
Right. Firstborn, implying the universal fatherhood of God. The other nations too are God's children. And in Abraham's seed, spiritually, the firstborn among them, all the families of the earth are to be blessed. So this expands.
Yes, it is the people, as you pointed out.
So Marty, it has a tendency then to go back to Genesis 12 at this point to explain this.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, yeah.
In some ways, we're going to be going back to Genesis also in a moment too. Yes, this is it also to pick up what was mentioned by Larry, it also underscores another, Israel is my firstborn son. Now, this is according to Rabbi Plout. In this scheme of spiritual inheritance, the violation of God's firstborn will be punished through the death of Egypt's firstborn. Remember, the firstborn sons of the Israelites are being killed by the previous Egyptian pharaohs. Okay. Any other comments?
Marty, I know that probably they mean nation. So let's say that it means nation. I'm Israel. So there is an hierarchy of nations, and this is the first one. There were not other nations before, or the rest of them are just number two, number three. I think it's puzzling to me. It's either Yaakov, and as you mentioned, it could be the nation. But to say that this is my firstborn nation, it's kind of strange to me.
Okay. Two other, Pastor Bruce beat you by a nose, Rabbi. So Pastor Bruce first, and then and then Rabbi Norman.
I just started thinking about what Rabbi Miri said, and
it's important.
I could it be in the historical sense that the first nation of which God introduced himself to would be the way to think about that? Not that firstborn is a very special part of lots of people's lives. Firstborn child, firstborn grandchild, there's lots of things that are special about that. But if God introduced himself to Abraham before anyone else, specifically in a relationship, maybe that's what he's trying to say there. I don't know. That's my thought.
I think that it's important to recognize that what Larry mentioned at the outset is we can't take the word or the phrase out of context. But if we go on to the rest of it, let my son go that he may worship me, yet you refuse to let him go. Now I will slay your firstborn son. And that also, son may also not just be Pharaoh's actual firstborn son, but Egypt. He will make it very hard for the Egyptians as well. And so it may be, this may be just another way of saying all of that. But it puts, I think, the context, we have to look at the context. It's not one person. We're talking, and the son can be used here two different ways as we're discussing. Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, in no particular order. And some of this, Marty, I apologize. I had to go out and help Lynn with something for a minute. But so I don't know if I'm paraphrasing my teacher, Dr. Plout, at all in what you were contexting here. But the biblical literature, even in Torah, has a lot of parallelism. So Israel and Pharaoh, Israel as one individual, or Israel as the people, Pharaoh as one individual, or Pharaoh as the Egyptians.
Right.
So there's the parallel there. But also, and this may have been Plout's comment, that just because the recognition that there is a firstborn, but you still love all your children the same way, but you do acknowledge that one, it's not a favorite, but there's a reality of the firstborn, and Israel are the first, as someone was just saying, are the first to accept the monotheistic belief in God, knowing and praying and accepting the challenge to teach and inspire others to follow along and join the people, join the family, if you will. Finally, the Bechori, my firstborn, but Bechor is also used to mean choice, the choicest, like the Chag HaBikurim is not only the first fruits, but it's also the choicest of the fruits that are brought on Shavuot. So it's not just the firstborn, it is really more of my favorite, the ones who will lead or represent all the others, and we hope that they will have the same quality in their lives.
Very good point.
Maybe a little sermonic, but
no, but it's very, very well stated. Gail.
I just
Gail,
want to say,
you're up.
That's an interesting discussion, but keep in mind, this is not what Moses said to Pharaoh. He said, "My people."
Right.
He didn't say firstborn. He didn't say, no.
That's right.
So I don't know whether this is, it's an interesting discussion, but I'm not sure it's particularly relevant when we get down the road a bit.
Exactly. Very good point. Yes, Rabbi Miri.
Well, the interesting part that comes to my mind is that Israel, I think, is the only nation that gets the promises to inherit as any firstborn that God does. And I'm with you, Rabbi Norman, that we're talking about the first people to accept and to worship one God, indivisible, indivisible for God.
Okay. Yes, Larry.
A while ago, you mentioned the branch, and we whittle it down to get to the essence of a rod. In many ways, in our thinking, we take complex ideas and try to whittle it down to an elevator speech or a bumper sticker. And I think the theme of these last few sentences are, "Let my people go."
Right. Very good point. Very good point. Yes, Rabbi.
Okay, I have to jump in, one to comment on Gail's and two to comment on Larry's. Gail's reminded me when she said that these were God's words, not Moses. By the time that Moses is repeating them, so you may hear it one way, but you say it another way. That they told us that in public speaking. figure out what you want to say, but realize that it will be said differently than what you wanted, and also realize that people will hear it differently than the way that you said it. So there's also that. And then Larry brings up, let my people go, but there's a play on the words here, and it's not necessarily let my people go and be free. It's let my people go out into the wilderness and worship me.
Yes.
At this point,
Yeah.
okay,
Yes.
God,
At this point.
the first
Yeah.
message is
Yes.
not free my people. The first message is for Moses to tell Pharaoh, let the people go out into the wilderness and learn how to worship God.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's another excellent.
It's a play on
Excellent.
words in the Hebrew, and we tend to forget it.
Again, we've taken the phrase out of context of
Right.
everything that's being said. So we have to be very careful with that. Any other comments? Yes, Don.
Another question. There are lots of theories on which pharaoh was in power at this time. And I read Friedman, I read a lot of the exegeses on the Bible. And one in particular, it's this gigantic volume by Isaac Asimov, science fiction.
Yes,
writer.
it's a good. He's written on this. Yes.
Yeah, so it's 1,000 pages on Bible commentary. You wouldn't expect it from him, but he concludes that the pharaoh at the time was Mehmeta. But there are lots of theories. So, but the point I'm driving at, it seems crucial that it's the individual pharaoh at the time on which the decision to let the Israelites go and worship. That's important because, I mean, one pharaoh was friendly to Joseph and his family, and then there was a succession of pharaohs after that. And I'm wondering why this poor guy, this one pharaoh, ended up carrying the load. Was he that much more evil than the other pharaohs, or is it just part of the Jewish history that this particular pharaoh triggered the Exodus and the move into Israel and Judah, into Canaan?
Okay.
It's a long question, but I just wondered, looking for some commentary on it.
Any comments about that from anyone in the group? Yes, Pastor Bruce.
I'm just, as I was just reviewing all three of these verses again, I'm just wondering how much Moses truly did understand, at this point about everything that was going to happen. I'm just looking at, is his faith, his trust, his thoughts. I'm just trying, again, as I always do, I try to put myself in his place at the given moment of which this is written in the storyline. And a lot of this stuff is new territory for Moses. And so I'm just really thinking, is God trying to show Moses his own credibility in the midst of all these things that he's saying here? And what is Moses saying? Is he saying, I believe in you, or I believe you exist, or I trust you, or do I have faith in you? Or where am I at in this part of this story as Moses, as the character? And so I just bring that up because it seems as if, as we get into this next section, that we're going to see Moses changing a little bit here, I think. But I was trying to think about these verses right here, right now, and how I would be viewing everything I'm hearing or everything that I'm listening to. But anyway, that's That's just a thought I had today, is in those verses alone. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Suzanne.
Oh, I'm not a mainstream kind of gal, so I do not believe that the Pharaoh was Ramses, which is what traditionally is taught. And I forget the name of the Pharaoh who I think it is, but it just doesn't make sense that it was Ramses.
Has anyone ever put themselves in the shoes of in Native American comments? Who is the Great White Father?
George Washington.
No.
Not for the Native American. It's earth, sun, wind.
It was just government. It's the same thing. You just say you had multiple presidents going through this time period. And so you would just say, maybe the government is the Great White Father. Maybe the title of president is equivocal to king or to Pharaoh. So does it really matter? If you look at it from the philosophical standpoint, it's an alien person who is ruling over the Egyptians, who thought he was also, who they thought was also God. It's not, the pharaohs were also not representatives of a god. They were thought of as gods themselves. And part of ancient Egyptian history, it includes a battle between the lunar god, the people who worshiped a lunar god, and also the people who worshiped a sun god. And to this day, kings always have used God-given right to justify their existence as a king. Okay, there's no evidence that God has done that, but they have used that. So maybe here we're using the term Pharaoh as an example of people who are this way. Yes, we like to believe in a Pharaoh. Yes, we would like to have a name, but is the name that important? Or is the concept of the leader who is the Pharaoh? Okay, a whole chain of pharaohs over a 400-year period. It's not just one pharaoh 400 years earlier, and then you have this new pharaoh. You've had a string of pharaohs who believed this and were treating what the Egyptians called the Ibri, the Hebrews. Okay, they were lower class. They considered Ibri lower class. So maybe this is if we change it to just look at the word, the concept of what Pharaoh represents, maybe that's more important than being able to say, oh, this was under this reign or that reign, because then it gets very confusing. And I always say that if we get into that, then yes, the term myth, but the myth may be more important than the actual physical evidence, because the concept here is what we're after. It's not a chain of events. It is the concept of it, and it deals with faith. It is not a concept of, do you believe this person or that person? It's, do you believe God and what God has said? Okay, so whether we look at it under the term of myth, or we want to look at it under the term of persons or events, this is a story of God's relationship to man and man's relationship to God. To paraphrase other rabbis who have written about this. Yes, David.
That's Wendy.
Oh, it's Wendy. You didn't lean back, David. That's why I thought it was you.
Now, I'm going back not into the mythology or anything. I'm just thinking the real world. And if I were one of the Jewish slaves, to me, it wouldn't make a difference who the Pharaoh was because none of them were kind. But if I were Egyptian, then it might make a difference. So really, I think it matters on which culture is looking at the pharaohs.
Right. Good point.
Yeah.
Very good point. So from the Hebrew, or the Israelites' perception, that's what this is about. This is our story. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
After we had the Torah study a couple of weeks ago, something came to my mind, and is the root of the word Pharaoh in Hebrew, that it's connected with the word Puranut. Puranut is, it's really when something horrible happens. Then something, Puranut is the noun. And maybe, as Wendy just said, that it's the concept of all of them. And if, I think it's a nice way of looking at them, because it's a concept, as Marty said. It's the concept of being bad. And a Puranut might come, and a Puranut is, and the pogroms is Puranut, and so forth. So I think that, and this is the first time I thought about it, so I thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi Mary.
Yeah, I just to
Please,
Mary's
Steve.
comment, if I may.
Yes.
I guess we really, unfortunately, I don't have my most important tool with me today, which is an entomological dictionary to look up roots of things and origins of words. But I think in this case, you really have to go back to what the Egyptians were calling their kings. Was an Egyptian word? Yeah, an ancient Egyptian words. What were they calling their pharaoh? Did they have a different word for it?
Well, I'll tell you something, Steve. When a certain president was in power, I never mentioned his name. And everyone got used to me calling them, what's his name? So it's not what you call it in your culture that counts. What is interesting, I don't think that our people, and I always talk about us, okay, that our people call us Israelites, Hebrews, all kind of names. Actually, we do Yehudim, that's descendants of one of the tribes. But you are posing a very good question, how they called their leader.
Because I guess the point, I probably didn't express myself clearly, but what I'm saying is, if it turns out that they called their pharaoh too, then it's an Egyptian word.
It would work.
It doesn't link to Puranut.
There's no question. There's no question it's an Egyptian word. It doesn't come from a Hebrew origin, etymologically.
Okay.
Yeah. So the word pharaoh existed before Paranut. But
it sounds good. Don't tell me it doesn't sound good.
Oh, of course it does. And it's appropriate because certainly from the Jewish, the Hebrew point of view, pharaonic, if I could make up that word, pharaonic behavior is paranut, is cruel. It's imposing. And that's why when it was Eliezer ben Yehuda or whoever who coined the term that came into modern
Yeah.
Hebrew usage.
So
Thank you.
yeah, this is a great discussion. I just think that you're all bringing things into this. Any other comments about?
One,
Yes, please, Rabbi.
one more. This is the first time it's pointed out in Eitz Chaim. I don't know about anybody else. This is the first time that we have that introductory phrase, Ko Amar Adonai, thus said the, imagine, Charlton Heston, thus said the Lord, or, and whatever. And it's the first time that we see that. And it becomes the signature no, it's not the signature, because the signature is at the end, but it becomes the opening phrase that categorizes this is a statement of prophetic message. Okay, I am quoting the Lord, right? God has chosen me to bring this message. Ko Amar Adonai.
Well, very good information. Any other comments? Verse 23.
Yeah, I can read that.
Just verse 23 to refresh our memory.
Okay, and I have said unto thee, let my son go, that he may serve me, and thou hast refused to let him go. Behold, I will slay thy son, thy firstborn.
Okay. Any comments about let my son go? I just wanted to underscore that because we touched on it a while ago. Okay. Yes, David, is that a Wendy hand or your hand?
Well, that's a David hand.
Okay.
I think it's the important thing is, done in the movie and done in the scripture is let my people go. But here it begins with let my son go, and it changes the reference from a nation to a family. And I think that is pretty important there. That's my point.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
So this becomes a much more intimate relationship, and the wording is very important in this whole paragraph. Yes, please, Suzanne.
I'm kind of going along with the idea that my son means Israel as a nation. And in comparing that to Pharaoh's firstborn, his firstborn son, that would be the continuation of Egypt as the nation, because I do believe the hierarchy passed from father to son, unless there were murders or other intrigues going on. But so I that's how I look at it, that God was trying to explain that the Israelites were his nation, his first nation, and he was comparing that concept to the concept of the inheritance of Pharaoh's firstborn and the continuation of the Egyptian nation.
Okay, good point. Because the next part of that, that same phrase, that let my son go that he may worship me, that's in God speaking. So it's like a comment. Well, let me ask you first about that part of this comment. We spoke about the first half. Now, what about the second half of that line? What were the Hebrews expected to do in Egypt? Worship their own God or worship Pharaoh?
Pharaoh.
You want to talk on that, say a few words about that, Suzanne?
Well, I don't really have much to say. It's just that they were held in slavery, and because Egypt was the country they were living in, I think they were expected to follow the Egyptian customs and who the Egyptian gods were, and to follow those traditions. I'm not saying that they did. I don't know if they did or if they didn't, or if they did both. Maybe they sometimes maybe they honored God, and maybe other times they honored the Egyptian gods. I don't know.
Well, does this go back to a conflict that the Hebrews would have had? Which God do I say, do I worship? Do I worship both gods depending on circumstances to survive? Do I, what about the Egyptian culture? They had many idols.
Mhm.
Yes, Steve.
I just think we might be reading a little bit more than is actually said anywhere about what the expectation was. I guess Israel, the people of Israel, they were slaves, and they were regarded as foreign. There wasn't an interest in stark contrast. Right now, we're in the season of Hanukkah, okay? The Seleucid Greeks had a defined interest. They wanted to integrate everyone. They wanted to enlighten the Jews, quote unquote, be part of our culture. You have to be part of our culture. It's just better, There's no mention of any of that with the Egyptians. They don't have an interest in homogenizing the people or integrating these slaves into their society. They're slaves. They're slaves. They're different. They're a foreign people. They're there to be factory workers or whatever, build pyramids. So I think we might be reading a little bit more into the story than is actually there. There's no reference to Pharaoh saying, worship me, I am God. He couldn't care less what they think, who they want to worship. He'll accept that maybe they have their own gods. Okay. And we can read about it a little bit later. It's fine that you have your own gods, but you're sure as hell not going to interfere with our work schedule. I've got things to be built here. We're not going to let you go. That's not going to work. We can give you a furlough for this. You want to worship your God, do it on your own time. But, we're not going to let you wander around in the wilderness.
I'm sort of reminded.
I've had my hand up for some time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
It's me again. The actual term, let my son go so he may worship me, to me makes no sense at all. Why should you want your children to worship you? Maybe the word is more respect because they let him go, but to turn around and say, let my son go so he will worship me, that's pretty egocentric, isn't it? So it's like, I don't like the way that phrase is done, whether it's God or a man saying it, it shouldn't be, because children should not be worshiping their parents. Respect is what they give.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, Pastor Bruce and then Don.
Well, I certainly believe that in this particular case, this is God telling Moses what to say, first of all. So that helps with that comment too. But I'm kind of also wondering, when you look at if Egypt, okay, if Egypt and Israel are included in son and son here, you know, it's the plural, it's the nation, if you will. And the people of Egypt considered Pharaoh and what he said to be God.
Mhm.
Here's where I hope I can get this in my head right, to say it right. If God is telling Moses what to say to the person that everybody in Egypt believes to be God, then that makes sense that he's directing it to the person who is taking his place, and that the people themselves then would be included in what's going on in everything. Did that, I don't know if that made sense.
Okay.
Yikes. I hope I did that okay, but it does that make sense to you guys, or am I confused? Was that too confusing?
Well, I'm getting after something that we say every week, and some people do it more often than that. Yes, Don.
Well, God has already told us that he's a jealous God.
Mm-hmm.
And he is quick to anger, and is pretty powerful. So we already know that. But this is probably the first time the Israelites have really been captive. And so now God is saying, okay, this is my people. It's time for them to return to me fully, and don't mess with me, because it's going to happen.
Good point. Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, this is between what Pastor Bruce was. This is between the God of Israel and the God of the Egyptians. This is between God and Pharaoh, Adonai,
Right.
and Pharaoh, not between Moses and Pharaoh.
Right.
So put the like I try to say all the time, put the emphasis on a different syllable. It's not so much God is saying, let them go to worship. It's let them go to serve. It's the same word to the servant and slave. Let them go to serve me, not you. Okay, this is a power struggle here. Who is this people going to serve?
Good.
But it says
wait, excuse me, Rabbi Mary Suzanne had her hand up for a while.
I'm so sorry.
I just want to agree with Rabbi Norman. My translation says, let my son go that he may serve me. My translation does not say worship. And so,
well, both are legitimate translations, but I'm saying put the emphasis on the me.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Rabbi, okay.
I agree.
It's capitalized me. Okay. Rabbi Mary.
Well, later on, please correct me, those that remember, I don't want to say, that they were worshiping something in the month of Aviv, which is the month of Passover, which is solstice, like this week, that there were in cultures that kind of festivities of the spring, the rite of spring and so forth. So I always looked at this, that there was a tradition of us going out to the desert and doing this, that it's not a novelty. Maybe the novelty is God says, you know what, go out and do, but I'll teach you who I am. Because Moshe says, they're going to ask me who you are and what shall I say to them and so forth. So they are clueless about God. But I think that they had a system of sacrificing for some reason, and it doesn't have to be for Pharaoh, because of the notion of the spring rites, R-I-T-E-S. I don't know.
That's another good one. Any other comments? Well, our discussion reminded me of two prayers that we say every Sabbath. And I'm just going to take the words from our prayer book. Mi chamocha, okay? Who is like you, O God, among the gods that are worshipped? Who is like you? Majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, working wonders. Your children witnessed your sovereignty, the sea splitting before Moses and Miriam. This is our God, they cried. Adonai will reign forever and ever. But this phrase we don't always include in our prayer. Thus it is said, Adonai redeemed Jacob from a hand stronger than his own. Praised are you, Adonai, for redeeming Israel. The V'ahavta prayer. Let me get to that. I have to turn my pages here.
Go backwards from Mi chamocha.
Yes. So if we go to the V'ahavta prayer, the last few lines, thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and be holy to your God. I am Adonai, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai, your God. So here we say this routinely. And I wanted to emphasize this, that this is God actually saying, and in a bit we'll discuss from the Pharaoh's standpoint how he would say what. He's saying to to not only to Moses but to the people themselves, the people of Israel, or Jacob/Israel and the Israelites. You have that I'm doing this so that you can worship me. Okay, and let's get, once and for all, let's get rid of all these other idols and people that you worship. I want you to now learn how to worship your God. And I think that's an important aspect to this, that in our discussions, I know when we piecemeal it, we can take it away, we can get off on all these different tangents, but it really is important to understand the motivations here. And if we look at Pharaoh, when this is going to be said to Pharaoh, taking the people who worship me away from me to worship you, this is a direct conflict. It's not just just a series of words. This is a big deal. Yes, Gail.
I have a question. Was God trying to destroy the Egyptian religion, or just giving the Israelites the freedom to worship? I'm not sure he was trying to destroy the Egyptian.
The second, yeah.
It's the second. We agree with you. That's right.
He wasn't trying to destroy the religion. He just wanted his people to be free. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Because we recognize in the prayers we recite every week.
Right.
that there are other religions.
Right. I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind too.
Yes,
It's freedom of religion is really what we're talking about.
exactly, exactly.
Well, it's freedom of religion, but it's also with the underlying hope that others will see that ours is a good, if not better, religious, path, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So
Well,
we acknowledge the others,
right.
but we're also kind of hoping, and sometimes we're more active and sometimes we're less active, but we're hoping that others will choose to join our way of thinking and believing.
But we've never been the kind that proselytize. We just don't do that.
Don't say never.
Well, you know what I'm saying.
Don't say
We're
say
not
never.
known.
There are certain times when we're very active proselytizing. But what we have never done is deny
That's what I mean.
the viability
Right.
of other religious
Right.
traditions.
That's right.
Right. No, and that's an important difference.
Yeah.
Yes. Larry and then Pastor Bruce.
That's why technically it's more monolatry than monotheism.
You want to say that
what?
again?
Monolatry, there is more than one God, but one God has more attributes, or
Right,
some are better
right.
than other gods. Monotheism means
Right.
that that there is only one
Just
God.
one. Right. Excellent. Pastor Bruce.
I was just thinking about, again, when I explained what I was explaining before, I mean, we believe God exists, but, we believe people exist. But that doesn't mean you're placing your faith or your trust or your life into the hands of a person per se. And I think that if the Egyptians were truly believing that Pharaoh was a quote unquote God, and if God is, as Don said, a jealous God, then he was thinking in terms of Pharaoh is replacing me. I'm just trying to put all these little things in a perspective in my own head, because they were trusting in Pharaoh to do all the right things, whereas God was trying to have the Israelites say, I need you to trust me to do these things and not the Pharaoh to do these things. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but it just seems like that there's a human perspective here. We respect other people who believe in other gods, but here's a group of people that believe that guy's the God. And that's where I was kind of trying to come from in all this. It was a human thing versus a spiritual out there somewhere thing. That's all. That's what I was trying to say, I think.
Good. Another good point. Yes, Don.
Also, I try to keep in mind that we tend to isolate the tension between the Israelites and the Egyptians, but the Egyptians were under huge pressures from other parts of the world there. From the Ionians, from the west, and the Persians, and the Mesopotamians. And they were all, they were all pecking away at Egypt, and so I can imagine that Moses would be a real irritant at this point in time. I'll get back to you. I can imagine Farrah said, I'm a little busy right now. So, although the Bible does isolate what's going on, it really wasn't an isolated scenario.
Good points. Good points. Yeah, and ultimately, Israel is going to be given territory that's right in the middle of it all. All of the battles over the trade routes and everything, it all comes down to the land that they're being given. Very interesting. Yes, Gail.
I just want to correct something that I said earlier about not proselytizing. I was thinking more of current day than I was
Right.
back in history. Obviously, there was a time when it was a little rougher.
Yes. Yes. Any other comments? What I am going to do is take the liberty of ending where we are now, because we're going to have another
Can't imagine
section.
why, Dr. Mark.
It's
Can't
going to be
imagine.
another section that's going to take up a lot of discussion time. So I thought that rather than splitting it up into two separate periods to discuss it, it's better if we keep it coherent that way, just with one time. And so next time,
2 weeks. We have a Saturday
2
morning
weeks.
service
Okay.
next week, right?
In 2 weeks, there's an interlude. Okay, in this whole story. That's still very important, and there's a ton of material, a lot of discussion about that we can go into. And we will pick up with verse 24. Now, I know we didn't make much headway, but I think we made a lot of headway in our discussions, even though we just went from verses 19 through 23. Okay, so we really covered a lot of material here. Any other comments before I turn it over to announcements, discussions, whatever? Okay. Well, Ruth Ann isn't with us yet, but any other discussions? Rabbi, you mentioned that there's service next Saturday morning.
Right.
And any other, do you want to talk about any of the other sessions during the week that you have coming up?
I don't have any this week. I know there's some meetings, sisterhood and brotherhood, but then a week from Monday, the second Monday of the month, will be the Parshat HaShavua discussion.
Very good. Excellent.
Hope to see everybody at the bagel breakfast tomorrow.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I hope it should be a nice shindig.
Yep.
Okay, well, with that, if unless anybody else wants to say bring up anything, why don't we
wish everyone a
wish
Chag
everyone-
Urim Sameach.
Yes,
Not Chag Purim, but Chag Urim Sameach.
Hanukkah. Yes. Enjoy the little time left in the celebration, and be safe and well. I'll see some of you tomorrow at the bagel breakfast, and otherwise in 2 weeks we meet again. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Thanks,
Shalom.
Mike.
Shalom.
Shalom, everybody.
Thank you.